Are live from the Results Operations Center here at Galilee Estate in Midrand. We have been following, the results that have been trickling in overnight as we were preparing. Obviously, now as it stands, we're on just over 97% of that total voter district counting. So as we edge closer to that 100% mark completion, in fact, we know, as you alluded to, the election process nears its finalization. South Africa obviously is getting closer and closer to the time before the nation gets to hear the outcomes of the much-awaited 2024 elections. And from the very beginning, the 2024 general elections have always been anticipated to be a game changer in the history of the country's 30-year democratic era. But 30 years later, it appears that these elections seem to be a landmark moment for the country, where for years now, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the CSIR, through its partnership with the SABC, of course, has been using its model to bring predictions to the South African audiences at large. And so this morning at the big desk, here at The Rock, we are joined in studio by Manager of Planning and Systems at the CSIR, Professor Pravesh, Debba, and also joining us is political analyst Dr. Fikile, Vilakazi, Senior Lecturer at the University of the Western Cape. Good morning to the both of you. Thank you for being here once again, bright and early. I don't know how many cups of coffee you've had, but aluta continua. Prof, before we get to you, Dr. Fikile, we were talking about a poem, a question, in fact, that Debba Mashile had asked: South Africa, do you have a name? Given the political era, given the dimensions unfolding, given what is at stake, how are we going to answer that question for us at this hour?
Well, I just want to say good morning to viewers at home and to you, Lizzo. Debba Mashile is a very interesting poet. She's one of these people through her poetry that keeps asking us very, very pertinent political questions as a nation, and one of them is about whether we have a name. And she says it so beautifully. She says, South Africa, you do not have a name. And she points to this, in a sense, taking us back to the liberation struggle, the struggle that we've waged against oppression and so on, particularly through the times of black consciousness. And the question of Azania then emerges, right? Yeah. And one would associate the name Azania to the struggles against apartheid. And when you name a country, you have to symbolize and find meanings to what has been happening to the people of that particular land. In the context of South Africa, the black consciousness movement in the 70s and in the 80s, through the leadership of people like Steve Biko and others, and other liberation fighters, in their negotiations actually came to the fact that perhaps our name can be Azania, because we were removed from the map. We come from the days of Mapungubwe, the Scramble for Africa eradicated a number of our names on the map. But Azania stood out because it symbolizes really the deep-seated struggles for the liberation of black people. And basically the meaning of Azania is the land of the black people, or the land of the oppressed. So that's basically resonated with a lot of the liberation fighters.
And it seems like there are more questions and answers at this point as well. Prof, before I get to you, I just want to pick up on that, because Dr. Fikile, we're also looking at liberation movements on the continent 30 years into democracy, the ability to govern as well, the trends of inevitable decline of sorts. Was this result or pending results predicted for the ANC at large?
Look, I think for the ANC, the sort of decline came faster. If you look at the liberation movements in different parts of the continent, they took about at least 50 years, 60 years or so. Look at the case of Zimbabwe, look at Zambia and so on. But we are 30 years in our democracy, and already the ANC from 2021 local government elections was starting to show some kind of decline. Perhaps that has got a lot to do with the context in South Africa, in a sense that the constitutional democracy that we have, the level of consciousness among citizens in terms of what citizens can demand and ask for is far different from other countries on the African continent. Perhaps that environment has necessitated the fact that we were able to hold the ANC accountable faster than the context in Zimbabwe, for instance, than the context in jurisdictions where the right, the freedom of expression is penalized, and the role of the judiciary is not so clear, but also constitutional rights are not so guaranteed like it is in South Africa, where we can express and voice and really speak to our leadership in manners that we can hold them accountable. But it is, I think it's sad that we have actually found ourselves here in 30 years where we are seeing a decline of the ruling party. Not a bad thing necessarily. I think it's a sign of our democracy that is maturing faster than elsewhere on the African continent at least.
Some sentiments from analysts, including Dale McKinley, who speaks about the commodification of politics. That's a theme we can explore. Perhaps also the overall shift to the right, but the world over, and what this is also, indicative of, what this means for South Africa in relation to that. Let's park that conversation there for now and bring Prof into the conversation. Prof, thanks for joining us again at this hour. I know you've been number crunching, you've been making sense of everything, but perhaps just for the sake of integrity, regarding the processes. I mean, the model can only predict, and we have been saying that from the start. But looking at major deviations from what was initially predicted around that 8% mark. Talk to us about the accuracy of the data as we're sitting here. We are about 97.0% completed. There's just a few more percentages to go.
Yes. So firstly, morning to all our viewers and yourself. We started releasing the results around 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning, and initially there was a lot of delay with regards to the voting stations coming in. Usually around 3 o'clock or so in the morning we used to get 5% of the data in, but this year we only got 5% around 8 o'clock or so. So we had to wait before releasing the result, and even when we got the 5%, it came in as a bulk. So we didn't have time to actually look at how the model is actually behaving, but we had to come on studio, so we had to make a call, and it was quite difficult to do it at that stage, but I'm glad that we actually did. So we released our first results. I think there was about 8% of the voting districts declared at that time. Yes. And what I can say is that the model has held up. So we're within our 2% margin of error for the national results that we had released at 8 o'clock. At later stages, we then released some of the provinces as they reached a certain point. So usually we wait until 15% of the voting districts are declared for each of the provinces before we release that. And I can say there again, we have been within our 2% margin of error. So we've really done well under an extremely difficult circumstance. This election has tested us in all ways possible. Yeah. So, I was also very, very nervous as to whether the model will hold up or not. And I've been very conservative giving out the results as we progressed as well. Yeah. But if you look at, for example, ANC, initially we were predicting them to fall around 41 and a half.
Let's save that. Save that. I'll tell you why. We're just going to also continue with our coverage on the SABC. Beyond our expert analysts here at the big desk at the Rock, we're obviously crisscrossing around the country, and we're still on rolling elections coverage. Let's in fact continue with our conversation with Professor Pravesh, Debba, as well as Dr. Fikile Vilakazi. Prof, let me continue with you. You laid the lay of the land for us in terms of the prediction model and how the data has been collected. Perhaps on the back of what Kani's now echoed, Section 55 objections coming through, disputes leading to possible outcomes. How do you factor that in at this hour, given the data emerging?
That is a little difficult for us because, we mainly look at, as the voting districts are declared, and, we run a model, we get a prediction and so on. But I think, the one thing I have observed is if you look at the comparison between the different ballots, because, this year for the first time we had 3 ballots.
Yes.
And the way in which people have voted, they have voted more or less quite consistently, for those 3 ballots, meaning that it wasn't so split. when it came to voting on the national ballot, on the regional ballot, and on the provincial ballot.
Okay, so as we unpack that, let's look at voter turnout at this point as well. It was predicted, it was hovering around 58%. I mean, arguably low. It's one of the lowest outcomes for South Africa since the 1994 democratic dispensation. Talk to us about what that's indicative of at this hour.
Yeah, so we also do the predictions for the voter turnout. So again, very early on Thursday, we had made a prediction that our voter turnout will be around 58%, and we were on the mark. So we're quite pleased with that. With regards to the history of voter turnout, if we look at 2009, the voter turnout was around 75. Yeah, it was around 75%.
Okay.
And then in 2014, it had dropped to 72%. In 2019, it had dropped quite a bit to 65%. And like we mentioned, this year, from 65% is dropped now to 58%. So, the voter turnout has been dropping considerably, while the number of registered voters has been increasing.
Exactly. That's an interesting take. Dr. Fikile, let me bring you into that. Talk to us about the significance of these developments into our 30-year democratic dispensation. That shift, what's it indicative of, politically speaking, given this landscape?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, I think it symbolizes the declining of trust that we have been seeing in our political system. Lizelle, trust is a very fragile property of us as citizens and as human beings. Once you break trust, it's very, very hard to regain it. And I think if you look at the trends that Prof is talking about, literally from our first election, around 2009 and where we are, you can see how trust in the system has been, just going down. So that is, for me, I think, a symbol of that. Again, the numbers that we see in terms of the voter turnout, I want to believe they are not far from the objections that are being made in terms of Section 55. I mean, some of the things that are being objected to, for instance, is the manner in which the IEC has dealt with Section 24A registered voters. Of course, we are aware that that is not necessarily a challenge or a problem of the IEC. I think it's the problem of the law, which was actually made by parliamentarians themselves, political parties that we are voting for in 2020. And those are the glitches. And I think that the voter turnout may have been implicated by that, because we had about 27 million or so South Africans that have registered, and almost close to half of that have voted, and the glitches in the system, and I think the objections that we're seeing that are coming out from various political parties are speaking to that. But generally, it's the issue of trust. There's a number of campaigns even during this election, Lizelle and viewers at home, that have been happening. One particular one is a campaign that has been saying no faith in the system. And that campaign has been consistent in saying, we have trust deficits in society. We need something else, something different, because if you keep on voting people back to parliament and nothing changes for a period of 30 years, what is it that is likely to change? Perhaps we need something different. So I think the numbers, Prof, are probably telling us, and the trends are telling us that that has changed. However, it was very interesting to see from the CSIR data, the survey around the satisfaction of the voter that is registered, that the majority of voters, on the contrary, indicated high levels of trust in the manner in which this election has been run by the IEC. I would want to allude that trust at a political level perhaps to hope, right? To say, we have had no trust so much since 2009. Something started to change in our political system. But the level of trust that is found by the CSIR here could be alluded to hoping for possibilities, right? Hoping for something different.
Yeah.
And you would see some of the reasons that are stated here. One of the top ones is, why did you come to vote? And someone was saying, I came out to vote mainly because I really just want to see something different. And others were saying, I'm hoping that my vote will really eradicate corruption, and I'm hoping my vote will increase an economy that is creating jobs. So those are like direct variables that are set by citizens in that study. And it's those kinds of dynamics that I think are probably telling us the numbers that we are seeing here, Prof, in your trends.
We, in fact, are going to continue to unpack those numbers and look at the key developments, what this also means for South Africa post-elections. So we'll leave that conversation there for now and continue on the other side of this. We'll be right back. Do stay tuned.